Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Jinkia, and I am the Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer of APIA Scholars. On behalf of APIA Scholars, I wanted to thank you all for joining us to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander Serving Institutions Program, otherwise known as the AANAPISI program. We know that AANAPISis have provided so much critical support to the 165 AANAPISi scholars who received scholarships this year from APIA Scholars, and also to the nearly 1,800 AANAPISi scholars that we have been able to support through college since the program's inception. So just to start off with a little bit of housekeeping, what we're going to do today is we're going to start off by hearing from an incredibly important individual who has not only been incredibly important to the formation of this program, but also plays a very special role in APIA Scholars history, the Honorable Dr. Robert Underwood. And then after that, we're going to hear from a fantastic researcher on behalf of a research team made up of a number of individuals led by Dr. Mike Nguyen at NYU. That's really going to tell us more about what AANAPISis have experienced over the past 15 years and really help us kick off a conversation about what we'd like to see happen in the next 15 years. So just to remind everyone, we are going to keep everyone on mute just to make sure that we can keep the audio clear. We are recording this, as you see that red button up there in the corner. And we're going to have a window to submit questions and answers instead of the chat function. And so we're going to be collecting that on our end and then hope to open it up after our panel discussion. So if you do have questions, please do go ahead and send them our way in that chat, and we'll make sure to get to you at the end of the conversation. And with that, I would love to introduce the Honorable Dr. Robert Underwood, former member of U.S. Congress and President Emeritus of the University of Guam.
Afade, and thank you very much, Julie, for that introduction, and congratulations to all of you on 15 years of a successful run for AANAPISis. AANAPISis actually began out of a bad experience. And in the late 90s, the College Board was the source of these bad experiences. They had issued a series of reports called Reaching the Top. And they did one for Native Americans, Hispanics, and for African Americans. They didn't do one for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders because they said there were no issues in higher ed for them. There were very few issues in terms of higher ed attainment. So in my capacity as chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, we shamed the College Board into sponsoring a meeting on Capitol Hill. And in that meeting, there were representatives of Southeast Asian organizations, representatives of Pacific Islander organizations, and immigrant groups came together in order to demonstrate that there was a need for this. So we drafted the AANAPISi legislation at that time. It took a few years for it to pass, but as we drafted that, we recognized that there was a need that needed to be met. But it wasn't universally accepted. In fact, there were even some prominent leaders who said, why don't you concentrate on something else other than higher ed? But I tell you, the eyes of those students who came to that Capitol Hill briefing and their counselors made a difference in terms of generating that energy. So the legislation came about, and it became, in the past decade, Asian Americans and Pacific Islander community is the fastest growing community in the United States. So what this tells us is that AANAPISis not only have to be funded more, then has to be increased exponentially, because AANAPISis become the vehicle through which we can present innovative programs that are tailored to the needs of the students in our communities and help them succeed and increase their graduation rates. So today we're going to hear about some of those programs. We're going to hear about some of those needs. And as I always try to tell people, the AANAPISis and the contributions of the students from this community are not only do they deserve the assistance that they will receive, but the country benefits from that. I always tell young Asian Americans and young Pacific Islander Americans, you have the potential of redefining the American nation in ways unimaginable to the founding fathers. Imagine that. Imagine what the founding fathers would see in the eyes of our young people today. Imagine how they would respond to the fact that the American dream is being perfected and redone and refounded in unique ways that only Asian Americans and Pacific Islander students can do. And in that process, you know, one of the most difficult things in working in the Asian American Pacific Islander community is the acronyms. You know, the acronyms are so darn awkward. So when we started the scholarship fund, it was the Asian Pacific Islander American Scholarship Fund. I was the first chair, and everybody had a hard time saying the APISF. So now we have APIA scholars. When AANAPISI first started, people would Google AANAPISI, and they would find that it was an Italian porn star. And so now, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix these problems and fix these issues? But there's something greater in that magic, in that even in the awkward nature of the title, even in the awkward nature of the acronym. So I congratulate everyone who has been involved in this over the years, and I urge them to apply for more AANAPISI grants and to create more innovative approaches to helping young people in our community not only fulfill their potential, but fulfill their promise for the entire country. The entire country benefits from this. This is not just a program that helps a community, it's a program that helps build a country. And so from looking at it from the ground, early ground in the late 90s and earlier part of this century, I've seen some magical things happen. I congratulate all the administrators. I congratulate all the academics, all the classified staff, and most especially the students who have benefited from these programs. So we're going to go forward, and in the language that my parents taught me, Sidus Maasi, thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Underwood, for starting us off with such an inspiring explanation of what this program has meant, most importantly for the students that it has served over the past 15 years. And so now we're going to continue the conversation about exactly what those programs are doing. But first, we're going to hear from a wonderful researcher, Christine Jan Cruz Espinoza, who is a researcher and doctoral student in the Department of Educational Psychology, Leadership, and Higher Education at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Christine, take it away.
All right, so thank you so much, Julie, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Jan Cruz Espinoza. And yes, I am a PhD student studying higher education at UNLV. And I'm also a member of an amazing research team led by Dr. Mike Nguyen from NYU, and with UCLA PhD student Dimitri Gogui and Dr. Pat Nelson from APAHI, Asian Pacific Americans in Higher Education. So these findings come from a research partnership with APIA scholars. And for me, being part of this team and to study AANAPISis is personal. It is personal because I'm a proud alum and student of 3 different eligible and funded AANAPISis throughout my college journey. I was a community college transfer student from Long Beach City College to the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I am now a doctoral student at UNLV, which is one of the 30 currently funded AANAPISis. And while I was not part of an AANAPISi program, at these AANAPISis, I learned from, was mentored by, and even got to be surrounded by Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander faculty, admin, and staff Mandy Westfall-Senda, Denise Nakaoka, Marilu Matsura, and Doctors Kahunavai Erin Wright, Lori Ideta, Christine Kemwell, Rod Labrador, and the late Dr. Nikki Labarios. I speak their names aloud into this space because I am here in part because of them. Next slide. So the purpose of this section is to share three things. So first, to provide a background with updated data points on AANAPISIs. Second, to share top-level findings from the National AANAPISIs study. And then finally, to share recommendations. Next. And here are the updated national trends our team calculated to offer a glimpse of the growth and impact of AANAPISIs. Next. So to date, while AANAPISIs represent only 6% of all colleges and universities in the US, AANAPISIs enroll over 40% of all Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander undergraduates in the country. AANAPISIs award nearly 50% of all associate degrees and 37% of all baccalaureate degrees earned by AA and NHPI students. Next. So as far as how many AANAPISIs there are, the number of colleges and universities eligible to receive funding continues to grow. It's seen an 81% growth over the past 4 years. And with 199 currently eligible AANAPISIs, AANAPISIs maintain the second largest number of eligible minority serving institutions, just second to Hispanic serving institutions. Yet, while the number of eligible AANAPISIs continues to grow, the number of funded institutions has hovered constant. Next. So despite maintaining the second largest number of institutions eligible for MSI grants, AANAPISIs continue to be the least funded designation. This figure represents the current fiscal year's MSI funding per capita. So funding per capita was calculated by looking at the total funding awarded by MSI type and then divided by the number of currently eligible institutions for each designation. Next. But we present this not to promote competition or invalidate necessary funding amongst MSIs. So instead, this is intended to demonstrate the limited funding AANAPISIs have and continue to receive. And importantly, any increase in AANAPISI funding should not come at the expense of other MSIs' current or potential federal financial support. Next. So contextualized with this background info. So here's what we looked at and found in our study. Next. The purpose of this AANAPISI study was to explore 3 broad areas. So first, becoming an AANAPISI. So what are the conditions or factors leading colleges and universities to apply for AANAPISI funding? Second, serving AA and NHPI students at AANAPISIs. So what kind of interventions or practices are used to serve AA and NHPI students? And then finally, institutionalizing programs and services funded by the AANAPISI grant. We aim to showcase the critical and innovative work happening across AANAPISIs. Next slide. And we partnered with AANAPISIs across the US and the US affiliated Pacific Islands. 25 of the 50 historically and currently funded AANAPISIs participated. So our campus partners are indicated in the blue font on this displayed map. So while I will only be covering some select points, you can read details in the research and policy brief, as well as a forthcoming full research report. Next slide. So here's what we found. For becoming an AANAPISI. So institutions primarily pursued grants to acquire funding for AA and NHPI students. So the grants served as a funding source to create, increase, or enhance campus programs and services, and to develop critical infrastructure that promote AA and NHPI student success. And these programs were often the first or even one of the few campus programs dedicated to serve AA and NHPI students explicitly. For serving AA and NHPI students, there has been intentionality in how AANAPISIs distinctly serve AA and NHPI students. So strategies have included developing or strengthening data-informed programming that works with assessment efforts on AA and NHPI student needs. Some institutions have collaborated with ethnic studies, Asian American studies, or Pacific Island studies to incorporate AA and NHPI history, communities, or issues into curriculum and pedagogy. And other institutions developed culturally relevant and community-based co-curricular programming specific to AA and NHPI students. And then finally, in order to institutionalize AANAPISI program efforts, it is important to secure resources to offer programs and services beyond the grant award timeline. But securing these resources is context specific, so to the institution and campus community, such as developing an agenda prior to receiving an AANAPISI grant to map out or figure out how to incorporate or consolidate existing campus structures, needs, services, programs, or curriculum that aim to serve AA and NHPI students. Next slide. So together with those updated data points on AANAPISIs, these findings have policy, practice, and research implications. I will be specifically sharing some of the policy recommendations. Next slide. So first, these findings demonstrate a need for increased funding and investment in AANAPISIs from federal agencies. Second, we suggest removing the multiple designation barrier that prevents institutions that are eligible as AANAPISIs, as well as other MSI designations, from accessing funding from multiple MSI programs. Third, the U.S. Department of Education and other federal agencies should use research and consult with the AANAPISI community to determine competitive preference priorities relevant to AA and NHPI students. And then finally, when it comes to grant program review, the U.S. Department of Ed and other federal agencies should prioritize institutions that demonstrate the unique ways that they will institutionalize their AANAPISI programs and services beyond the grant. So overall, what we've seen, while AANAPISIs have had limited funding, AANAPISIs have been able to do a lot to support AA and NHPI students with intentionality. And with continued and increased investment, there is so much more that AANAPISIs can do. And next slide. And with that, I wrap up this brief overview and I welcome you to stay connected. And thank you, APIA scholars.
Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you to the entire research team that Christine was part of for sharing all of these important details and descriptors of how the program has actually evolved over the past 15 years. And like Christine said, painting a picture for how much more these programs could do with some increased investment over the next few years. So with that, I'm just going to remind everyone the research and policy brief that Christine mentions, we will put a link in the chat, the research brief, so please feel free to take a look at that and definitely stay connected, like Christine mentioned. Next, what we'd like to do is play some remarks from Chairwoman Judy Chu, who actually, wants to commemorate this anniversary and will be introducing the resolution in Congress to celebrate the 15th anniversary.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, Chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or what we call CAPAC. And I'm so thrilled to be joining you all to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Asian American and Native American Pacific Islanders Serving Institutions, or AANAPISI program. I want to thank APIA scholars for organizing this briefing to raise awareness of AANAPISIs and for the important work you do every day to support our communities. All too often, our community is stereotyped as a model minority, implying AAPIs do not face the same educational obstacles as other communities. But this is simply not true. Significant disparities exist between AAPI subgroups. For example, 20% of Hmong, 27% of Laotians, and 25% of Cambodians do not complete high school, and only 19% of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have attained a bachelor's degree. These statistics are exactly why Congress created the AANAPISI program 15 years ago to improve access to education for AA, NHPI, and low-income students. And since its creation, AANAPISIs have enabled thousands of these students to obtain a college degree. In fact, right now these institutions enroll over 40% of all Asian American and NHPI undergraduate students in the United States. That is a significant portion of our population. And that is why we in CAPAC have made it a top priority to ensure equitable funding for the AANAPISI program. We have consistently advocated for increased funding through our annual appropriations requests, and I'm proud to tell you those efforts have been successful, resulting in nearly double the funding level for AANAPISIs this year. And we will continue to fight for increased funding in any attempt to reauthorize the Higher Education Act. I'm also proud to introduce a congressional resolution each year to recognize AANAPISI Week and highlight how these institutions have enabled thousands of AANHPI students to pursue their dreams of attaining a college degree. But more importantly, my annual resolution encourages eligible institutions to apply for the AANAPISI funding available to them so they can better support the unique educational needs of their students. This is so critical because although there are 199 of these eligible institutions as of the 2021-2022 school year, only 50 of them have been funded. So we still have a lot of work to do, and you can count on CAPAC to continue to fight for increased support until all eligible institutions are able to get the funding they deserve. So thank you again for inviting me here today to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the AANAPISI program. I look forward to our continued work together to strengthen this program and to ensure that all students, including AANHPI students, have access to higher education. Thank you.
Wonderful. And on behalf of APIA scholars, we also thank Chairwoman Chu for her leadership of CAPAC and helping us celebrate the important impact that AANAPISIs have had on student success for students from our communities. So next, we're going to get into my favorite part of the briefing, which is actually a conversation with some esteemed panelists. I'm going to introduce them one by one, and then we'll kick off a conversation. And this is just a reminder, if you do have any questions that occur to you while our panelists are speaking, please do put them in the chat box, and we will make sure to get to them after the panel is done. So today I'm joined by Ariana Ahmed, who is an AANAPISI scholar, undergraduate student, and student government president at Hunter College. I'm also joined again by Christine Jan Cruz Espinoza, whom you all heard fantastic research findings from. Again, she's a researcher and doctoral student in the Department of Educational Psychology, Leadership, and Higher Education at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We're also joined by Dr. Timothy Fong, Professor of Ethnic Studies and the Director of the Full Circle Project at California State University, Sacramento. And finally, last but not least, we're joined by Dr. Rowena Tomanang, who is President of San Jose City College. So please join me in welcoming everyone. And we're gonna go ahead and get our conversation kicked off with you, Ariana, if that's cool. What we wanted learn from you is, you're a student leader on campus. What do you think it's important for incoming students to know about the AANAPISI program at Hunter?
Specifically, I think HCAP, Hunter College's AANAPISI project is basically a community that I found when I first enrolled in Hunter College in 2019. And one of the first things that I learned when I went to one of their workshops or the introductory meetings is that the Hunter College population is 33% Asian American or Asian immigrants of some sort. And I was really blown away. But I knew that there was a large population of Asian students at Hunter College, but I truly did not see that type of community become unified or comprehensive until I went to HCAP. One of the things that I would say about my experience of being like a student leader and just a general Asian American student at such a specific school like Hunter College, which is a commuter school, which is a school for a lot of low income first generation students, is that you will find community if you get involved, if you find commonalities with individuals, and there also has to be a structured support system. HCAP has specifically helped me by hosting events that are towards destigmatizing mental health. They've helped me host my own events around South Asian queerness, which is something I would have never imagined at hosting or even talking about in public. But AANAPISI programs such as HCAP have had received the funding and incentive to host all these student ideas, these projects. And I feel like when you come into a school as big as Hunter, it's so easy to feel scattered, so easy to feel like you have community and you see someone who's also Asian American right in front of you or Asian, but you don't have that means of connection to them. I feel like it is one of the bridging factors within like a college experience, specifically at a commuter school. I need to emphasize that because a lot of students really do want to go home, but it's these programs like HCAP that keep them after, that give them a reason to stay and build back that community that they might miss or might have missed in other institutions that are not specifically geared towards API students.
Thank you so much. And, thanks for really starting our conversation out about how important a sense of belonging and community is when we get to campus in order to get to and through college. So next, Dr. Tumaning, I was wondering if you could share with us from a different perspective on a campus as an institutional leader, a little bit about the AANAPISI identity and what it means to you and your campus.
Thank you so much for the question, Julie. And I too, like my fellow panelists, want to extend my appreciation to APIA scholars for organizing the various activities that we are doing this week to celebrate AANAPISI Week and the 15th anniversary of AANAPISIs as a funded minority serving institution category. So for me, expansion of AANAPISI programs is hard work. It deeply matters to me as an institutional leader within California, where my college resides, but also nationally in my role as president of Asian Pacific Americans in Higher Education, or APAHI. I'm a first-generation immigrant from the Philippines, and I am proud that I too am a community college transfer student. And so because of my lived experience, I connect with many of the barriers that our AANHPI students experience. So these barriers include affordability and basic needs. We're dealing with anti-Asian discrimination and racism and violence. And then as we learned during the pandemic, we continue to have a digital divide. So there are lots of students who still have lack of access to technology to be successful in their studies. Supporting AANAPISIs for me is important as well, because I've had the privilege of leading 3 AANAPISI institutions. One of which was federally funded twice by the grants. I have witnessed in this work firsthand the power of AANAPISIs in increasing student outcomes for underserved AANHPI subgroups. And it's as what Christine talked about earlier in sharing the research. So some of my institutions have been part of these research studies. And we have disseminated the findings in terms of course retention, course persistence, transfer and degree completion increases. And in relation to the work that APIA Scholars has been doing over the last 15 years, also the power and impact of scholarships, in enhancing and propelling students to move through their educational pathways. So that's why it matters in terms of expanding the amount of funding and continuing that advocacy work that Representative Judy Chu talked about earlier, and working with organizations such as CAPAC and others to advocate for increased funding. Now, we know that we have many more institutions that are AANAPISI eligible. Representative Chu mentioned we have about 199 right now, but yet we have fewer numbers, about 30, and maybe we'll hear more with the upcoming competition, who are funded. So for me, this is a challenge as an institutional leader, currently my college is not a funded AANAPISI, but our college has been working on how do we embrace our identity as an AANAPISI at the same time continuing all of the great work that we've been doing also as an HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. So I am in a dual designated institution. And for us, what that means is we are looking at the resources that we have currently, and we are allocating resources so that we can also serve our AANHPI students and what their needs are. We've got other types of categorical funding that the state provides us in basic needs and affordability, in mental health supports, in free tuition, in emergency grants. And so it is really about the institutional commitment, and that is the challenge for leaders across our different AANAPISI institutions. Just because you don't have funding doesn't mean that you can embrace the identity and begin to support, little by little, your AANHPI students, because we are in education for educational equity. And so, one of the easy steps that leaders can make, is just to disaggregate your data, look at the existing resources, and begin to support across groups your AANHPI students. And so I think I'll go ahead and stop there because we will have a conversation on dual designation and some of the barriers. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Tummening. And thank you for beginning the conversation a little bit about what it means to be designated to serve more than one student population. As Christine mentioned in the policy recommendations, we would like to see the funding barrier lifted so that institutions that are serving more than one student population actually get the resources to serve more than one population. Given demographic growth in this country, we know that this is just going to become ever more important. So next, I'd like to turn to Dr. Timothy Fong. Dr. Fong, you have, as the director of the Full Circle Project, just really pioneered the importance of using data to identify what needs students have, and then actually to use data to design strategies to help them succeed. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of data disaggregation in determining the impact of AANAPISI programs?
Yes, thank you, Julie, and thank you to APIA Scholars for organizing this important event, and want to thank the audience who are here and your interest in AANAPISIs nationally. The data disaggregation is crucial, and I want to go back a bit. We received our first AANAPISI grant in 2011. So we just recently celebrated our 10th anniversary of our first AANAPISI grant. We have successfully received 2 additional AANAPISI grants in 2016 and in 2021. We are the longest standing AANAPISI program in the California State University system. And much of this has begun with the importance of data and disaggregating data. When I first wrote the AANAPISI grant for Sacramento State in 2011, actually 2010, when we were writing it, I was looking at data from the university. And one of the things I noticed was that it was not broken up very well in terms of different Asian Pacific Islander groups. And then we had a huge number of other Asians. And I couldn't quite figure out who are these other Asians? And so when I worked with our institutional research office and did some work and getting the detail, the information was there, it's just not reporting it. And it turned out that a large percentage of the other Asian were actually Hmong American students. And it turned out that Hmong American students were the second largest Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders population on our campus. And nobody knew that before. In addition, we looked at the data, the university's own data, to show that in the aggregate, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander student graduation rates were actually lower than the university average. And I would tell this to administrators at the time, and they would say, "Oh, I didn't know that." And then I would tell them again 2 weeks later, and they said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I tell them again 2 weeks later, and they said, "I didn't know that." And it was the university's data. And there was a cognitive dissonance of understanding because, as was mentioned before, the model minority myth is so strong that even confronting the data, it was hard to go beyond that. I think we've changed over time in a very positive way. We are actually doing very well in terms of disaggregating data on our campus and in the CSU system. I remember, again, a long time ago when I talked to the CSU system about disaggregating the data. And I remember the response, and I do believe Simon Kim is in the audience, and he was with me. The response was, "Oh, we can't do that." And but things have changed. And because of our persistence and efforts, we are doing that. And in fact, I am involved with what's called the CSU Student Success Data Analytics. And it is the CSU system overall looking to disaggregate data in terms of not only race and ethnicity, but also gender, as well as low income and first generation college. And there are huge distinctions that I think enlighten many people who think of data as more generic, and being able to drill down has been so significant. Another part I want to highlight is the CSU came out with a report many years ago called the Historically Underserved Students, or Rethinking the Underserved Students. Prior to this, they were looking at underrepresented minorities. And basically that didn't include Asians. And so the report talked about, we didn't need to rethink of the underrepresented and look at underserved students who are not getting services because primarily they're low income and first generation and other areas that can be looked at. And the report said, quote, approximately 35% of Asian students who are currently classified as non-underrepresented should be considered underserved and provided with additional support to facilitate their path to a college degree. I used the data generated by the system, generated the data used by Sac State. You had to do a little bit of digging initially. I think things are getting better now because of the attention and the persistence. And so we're utilizing the data to be able to identify the needs and also to identify successes. And quite honestly, in the last 10 years at Sacramento State, Asian Pacific Islanders overall had among the lowest graduation rate on our campus. That has improved dramatically. And we can show that. And the biggest increase, quite honestly, was among low income and first generation AANAPIS students, of which Full Circle Project focuses on primarily. We can look at the data. We have looked at the data to show the improvement, but also areas of need still. There are still some areas, some populations that are in need of more assistance. And we continue to highlight those elements. So data is crucial to any institution wanting to serve and support underserved students.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Fong. And if I could ask you a follow-up question, really, it's so powerful to hear about the diversity of students in our community and, the utility of data in helping us see that diversity. But I'm also thinking about, your direct experience with the AANAPISI program. And as Ariana helped us understand, how important the sense of community building is of these programs. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the Full Circle Projects program and what types of programs and services do you offer students?
Primarily, the Full Circle Project started, I am a professor of ethnic studies. And so it was from the very beginning, it was the foundation for the Full Circle Project was was Asian American Studies and Ethnic Studies. We created a freshman learning community of which students are required to take Asian American Studies classes, along with a freshman seminar that we specifically designed. The attention also is we understand absolutely the differences between different ethnic groups, and we honor all those differences. At the same time, why is it that at our campus and other campuses as well, I should mention, it's not just Sacramento State, that Asians don't do as well as people, quote unquote, would expect based on the stereotype. The largest population of low-income students on our campus is actually Asian Pacific Islander students. Again, one of the data points that when I point out to people, they say, oh, I didn't know that. And you have to repeat it and show the data to highlight that. And that I can't say that's true for other institutions, particularly more elite institutions, but certainly in the case of a comprehensive urban institution, and I suspect it's probably true with many community colleges as well. And it's important to recognize that. So we identified, obviously, the importance of identity formation, but also leadership development for students, as well as, quite honestly, because of my background in Asian American Studies, is a Pan-Asian community. We have a lot of different students, but there wasn't a sense of community. There wasn't a sense of, I was sort of by myself, despite the fact we had over 20% Asian students. So one of the things that I think we've done very well is highlight a stronger culture for Asian American Pacific Islander students. That they are part of the university. They're welcomed by the university. They're supported by the university. And I can speak from some of the students who were before Full Circle, and there weren't anything for Asian American Native Hawaiian student and Pacific Islander students. So that in itself, just changing the culture, which is hard, but has taken us 10 years. But I think this is I think one of the great successes of our program, and I'm hoping that can be translated to other institutions with enough support over time to make the success happen.
Thank you so much. And it's such an important reminder that with over 20% APIA students at California State, Sacramento, and over 30% APIA students at Hunter, the importance of the AANAPISI program really goes much more beyond just enrollment numbers. And it's about embracing that identity of creating a culture of belonging for students. So really appreciate that point. And Christine, I know that you are in the thick of developing your own dissertation on the multiple designation issue. And we're already seeing some questions roll in about this. So do you mind, just starting off that conversation? What have you learned about that multiple designation issue?
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. Of course, I'm happy to chime in. But first of all, I did have to take a peek around the Zoom participant list and check out if my advisor, Dr. Blanca Rincon, was in the room, because I have not yet gotten to the dissertation proposal phase. But humor aside, so yes, I will be proposing as my dissertation research really focus on this dual eligible MSI phenomenon, because I know I shared earlier that I'm a proud alum and a current student of 3 different AANAPISis, but actually all 3 of those are dual eligible AANAPISis or dual funded, right? So I think about like Long Beach City College, UNLV, where I am now. It's both a funded AANAPISi and an HSI, and a funded HSI at that, being funded by the National Science Foundation. And then the University of Hawaii at Manoa, go Bows, is an AANAPISi and a Native Hawaiian serving institution. And I know that this issue is not new. AANAPISi practitioners have been calling it out for years. And even in the number of interviews that we conducted for the National AANAPISi study, there were the challenges did kind of come to the surface of what that meant to navigate that, and this idea of like choosing. And I at this time, I do want to lift up and credit Jennifer Yang and Marites Masulit, who is in this space, for a piece that they wrote that, still exists as being one of the few that focuses on dual designated institutions. And they work with Full Circle Project. And at that time, when they wrote that chapter in 2018, 11 of the 18 California State University system institutions were eligible as AANAPISI and HSI. And so I did take a look at the 2022 data prior to this meeting. And, out of the 199 eligible AANAPISIs, 115 of them are dual as HSIs. So if you do the math, that's 57% of all AANAPISIs are also HSIs or eligible HSIs. And if you reword that in the lens through Hispanic serving institutions, there are currently 545 eligible HSIs as of 2022. And with 115 of them being AANAPISIs, that's 21.1% of all HSIs. So that's 1 in 5 HSIs are AANAPISIs also. And then when I think about AANAPISIs that are also Alaska Native Hawaiian serving institutions, there are 21 Alaska Native Hawaiian serving institutions, and 13 of them are AANAPISIs. So if you flip that, so thinking about just, the 21 Alaska Native Hawaiian serving institutions, and 13 out of the 21 are AANAPISIs. So I think for me, I absolutely think that this is an area of that is ripe for research. And it's also important because, as someone who also came out of these institutions, there have been times where sometimes one of the institution designations has been prioritized over the other. And so sometimes I have felt, marginalized or made invisible. And I'm hoping that, we think about this more intentionally.
Thanks so much, Christine. And I think that's a perfect place to sort of, kick off this conversation. Rowena, I saw you take yourself off of mute. So I'm hoping, that you would like to also contribute to the conversation about what dual designation really means and what the barriers are.
Yes, thank you so much, Julie. And I did drop in some initial thoughts in the chat that I just wanted to express to the bigger group. So there was a question in the chat around the dual designation and multiple designations. And what I dropped in is that there is confusion, ongoing confusion over the years around the funding piece in terms of the dual designation barrier. And so I wanted to just be clear that the barrier has to do with certain categories and types of grants. And unfortunately, in terms of the types of grants, such as the Part A grants, those are much more in terms of the funding being allocated to institutions and the difficult choices that have been made in dual designated or sometimes triple designated institutions, has resulted in one group, to Christine's point, one group of student population being focused upon and selected because of the funding opportunity. And so I've observed this over the years with both 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions. And sadly, this really does have a negative impact on the campus climate of the institution because it, jeopardizes sense of belonging. All the work that Tim has been doing with Full Circle Project and changing culture at Sac State, it could undermine 10 years of effort in a very short time period. And I also wanted to underscore that, our institutions and our missions, our visions, our value statements, with the racial reckoning that has been happening and intensified in the last couple of years, there are commitments being made all across the country to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racism. And so, having a tough choice like this, really has people on campus, students and employees, questioning the institutional commitment, to inclusivity. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tomanang. And, thank you for actually putting a face and personifying, this issue, which often gets really, really in the weeds, about funding barriers in legislation. But by just identifying that this is really playing out and causing conflict on campus between different communities, I think just points to the urgency of having, of fixing this problem, removing that barrier. And like we mentioned earlier, you know, demographically, this is just going to continue to become more important of an issue as we have an increase in multiracial populations, we have an increase in institutions that are serving more than one population. Tim, would you like to weigh in on, you know, the dual designation issue? Because I know California State University of Sacramento also has a special status.
Right. Thank you. I was going to say that, yes, we are, Sacramento State is dual designated and actually dual funded, HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution, and an AANAPISI, but it's very segmented. So Part A, as was mentioned before, is basically funded HSI programs. And we cannot get both funding under Part A. So we can only get funding over with Part F, and that's how Full Circle Project has been funded over the years. But it causes a conflict basically every 5 years when we cannot even apply for an AANAPISI grant for Part A because we are already a HSI. So we're not even allowed to apply. So there's not a chance to even start. Now the trick between that is, so the university will apply for an HSI grant every 5 years because it's renewal. There's a chance that they wouldn't get funded. And the fact that they have to apply, may not get funded, we can't even apply for AANAPISI. The university is always in a threat to get nothing every 5 years. So that's always the challenge as well. And in California State University system, where I am at, out of the 23 campuses, about 15 are also are dual designated. And of the AANAPISI funded institutions in the CSU system, is only about 3. So there is clearly disincentive for support for applying for an AANAPISI grant, plus the fact that if an AANAPISI grant is funded, it sort of locks out HSI for the next 5 years, and HSI funding is twice as high. So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made at a higher level that it's unfortunate people have to make the choice of choosing essentially one child over another.
Yes, you know, thank you for drawing a fine line under that point of the impossible decisions that institutions really have to make, because the students don't go anywhere, right? They are still on campus and deserving of supports. So thank you for weighing in there. One of our questions has come in. Ariana, folks want to know, how did you decide to go to Hunter? And specifically, how did you hear about HCAP?
Thank you, Julie. I do think I have a funny story for this one. So when I was a senior in high school, I was deciding between staying somewhere in the city versus going upstate for colleges like Binghamton or Stony Brook. And at that point, I was still pre-med in my life. I had not considered that I had to pass and take pre-calc to become a doctor. But when I visited one of the upstate schools, I will not name them here because they are a good school, but one of the things that drew me to that school is that they did have a big Asian American population. And I grew up in Forest Hills, which is pretty close, it's in Queens. Queens is one of the biggest and most diverse, has the most diverse Asian American populations or Indo-Caribbean populations, West Indian populations. And I find that to be home because food has really been a big connecting cultural artifact in my life. So I really do need to be close to South Asian food. I went to the school and I saw that there were a lot of Asian American students, and I did feel very close to them. They had a lot of pride and the sense of where they came from. But one of the things that fragmented me was, actually threw me off, was the difference in socioeconomic levels and understanding of how they presented their Asian American identity versus mine. I then looked at Hunter College, and when I visited, I noticed that there were a lot of students that had a similar background as me, had a similar story, and I could connect to them more easily. Once I chose Hunter College specifically because it was also a more accommodating institution towards my needs, which are often very financial in nature, as we see with a lot of low income and Asian students, that we do have a very specific financial need. I found HCAP also in a very funny way because they were throwing introductory party and there was South Asian food there. I had never truly seen South Asian food at one of the more larger Asian centric events. I have often kind of found that South Asianness is left a little bit alone within the larger Asian identity. So I really felt so excited. Like even in that little segment of food, I felt very connected to what Hunter College and HCAP specifically had to offer to me. Once I got involved with HCAP, I found that it was the right decision to go to Hunter College because not only could I interact with students that were from the same background as I am, but they understood the intricate complexities that came with having a similar financial, socioeconomic background, having the immigration experience of coming here at the age of 15 and having to reassimilate all over in high school, having that identity that is so intricately bound in womanhood, queerness, what type of professions your parents do. I didn't think I could find that explicitly within a lot of upstate schools, specifically because a lot of the individuals I met out of those upstate schools were, their parents had been here for a long time. And unlike mine, I didn't find that part in common with them. I know that's a long-winded answer, but I chose Hunter College because of the Asian identity that I could believe and transform here. I've transformed into like a version of myself that I was truly proud of. And not only because I was an Asian person, but because I was a multifaceted and intersectional person. Sorry, the S's. I was a first generation Asian American student. I have a queer Asian identity. I have come from a socioeconomic background that impacts a lot of Asian American students like myself. And I found that Hunter College was the best type of institution to go to if I wanted to feel at home.
Thank you so much, Ariana, for sharing your story and also for, underscoring the transformative potential of these programs in real time. Really appreciate it. And so I know that we're wrapping up, so I just want everyone to join me in thanking our panelists and of course, the Honorable Dr. Underwood for starting off our conversation this morning. We are looking for support, for folks to actually help us make the case for increased funding and removing barriers so that more colleges and universities can serve more students from our communities. And so if you've heard anything in today's webinar, even one point that made you convinced that AANAPISis need more investment and more resources to help students from our communities, we're actually going to put a link in the chat, and we will also share it after the webinar. But please consider signing on your support. This letter is to Congress, and it will help bolster support for leaders like Chairwoman Chu and allies who are really bringing attention to this funding inequity and really trying to put their heads together with us about how we can remove barriers and allow colleges and universities to serve all of the students that they're enrolling. So with that, I just want to thank everyone again. APIA Scholars has been honored to partner with so many individuals across the AANAPISi community, across the APIA Scholars communities, and we really just want to take this opportunity to congratulate the field on 15 strong years. Thank you, everyone. Take care.